Hey everyone, welcome to the Canine Culture Podcast, where we talk about everything dog. Q&As with veterinarian professionals, rescue operators, everyday topics. We cover everything dog on this podcast. So make sure you subscribe to the Canine Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media on both Instagram and Facebook. Thanks again for listening. Now here's that next episode. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Canine Culture Podcast. This is your host, Brittany, and today we are joined by Paul. He is the founder of the Flying Fur Animal Rescue, and I'm so excited to have him as a guest today for all of the wonderful work that he does. So thank you, Paul, for joining us.
Well, thank you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, Paul, what you do, and kind of how you got started in the animal rescue world.
Well, by trade, I'm a network engineer, but I got started with, I've worked in IT for 20 plus years. But I got started with animal rescue in a very backwards kind of way. I decided to take a few flying lessons back in 2013. My mother had given me my uncle's logbooks from when he was a pilot back in the 40s, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go for a lesson, and scared the hell out of me the first flight or two. But I said, you know what, I'm not going to quit. I'm going to keep going back. And leading up to this, I had actually changed jobs. I had been working at a place almost an hour away, and I found something that was very close, less commute, less stress, and that's how I go past the airport every day, which led me to take a lesson. From there, continued my lessons at a different airport, and then in 2013, the fall of 2013, after coming back from a trip to Greece, also adopted a puppy named Tessa, who came up from Tennessee in the back of a van to get to rescue. And if you're sort of new to adoption, you don't really know anything. You don't understand what goes on in the background. You just have no clue. So you're like, then I'm like, why did this dog have to come up from Tennessee in a van? I'm like questioning all of this. So as I'm continuing my journey to become a pilot, I started to learn more about animal rescue, and I became certificated in the fall of 2014. And the thing about becoming a pilot, whether you're going to be commercial at my age, I'm not going for that, but you just spend all this time and effort and money to become certificated, and then you get there, you're like, holy crap, like, what am I going to do now? Like, not going to fly around for no reason. So as a new pilot, there's not a lot you can do for good reason. I wanted to potentially do angel flight, which my flight instructor had done, but you need a lot of hours and ratings and stuff, and for good reason. You're flying, people around. But you didn't need any of this to fly animals. And having adopted Tessa and started to experience what it was like to have a dog in my life, I found Pilots and Paws. And I would start to rent airplanes from where I learned how to fly, and I would team up with other pilots, and there might be 4 or 5 of us to move one dog, a couple states, something like that. So I did that for a little while, and I thought, you know what, this is pretty much the only reason I fly. And it's not very efficient to do it the way we're doing it. So I decided to start flying for animal rescue. That was actually in the spring of 2015, so not very long after I learned how to fly. And I would continue to rent the airplanes from the airport. They were very nice about it. Until 2017, we were able to, raise some money, and I was able to purchase an airplane. I was like, holy crap, there's only like 25 grand in the bank. Like, if this thing breaks, we're screwed. Like, there was some nervous times there. And it just kind of went from there. And then I could start to service the rescues that I worked with better by having a dedicated airplane. I could fit many more animals in the airplane than we have. And it just kind of took on a life of its own. And it was a source of pleasure and enjoyment. And I was spending a lot of money. I was spending over 10 grand a year just renting airplanes before we had one. But I didn't care.
Mm-hmm.
I just didn't care. Like, there was such a source, knowing that for that couple hours of flight time, you could have gone out to dinner, you could have bought sneakers, whatever, but here you're flying an airplane and you're helping to get these animals. You're the difference between life and death.
Mm-hmm.
Helping to get these animals. And that's one of the things a lot of these rescues struggle with, is getting solid transport. And it started to go from there. And it's just been the most rewarding, fulfilling thing I've ever done in my entire life.
That's amazing. A lot of people in rescue will resonate with the cost, the amount of time, and you took both of those factors to a whole other level.
Yeah.
And that really says something about you and your character. And that's just amazing, that you're able to kind of combine a little bit of a hobby with a passion project, and you truly are making a difference. And so everyone in animal rescue, I'm sure, bows down to you, because that's amazing. So
One of my favorite quotes is from Arthur Ashe, a famous tennis player, and he literally, one of his best quotes was, "Start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can."
Hmm.
And that's exactly what I did. I said, I can't do everything, but I can do something. And that's where we're going to start. And that's what the sort of the mantra I followed ever since then.
Yeah. That's a great mantra to live by, because I think sometimes we get so focused on the entire forest rather than looking at the next tree in front of us. We see hundreds of animals. We're like, gosh, I just wish I could save them all. And it's like, well, we don't need to. Let's just start
Right.
with one dog. Let's start with one mission. So tell us exactly what Flying Fur Animal Rescue does, kind of what the nonprofit entails.
So as of today, from the time I started this, it was to provide free transportation, free, safe, comfortable transportation to other 501c3 rescue groups that might otherwise have to pay for maybe a lesser experience with a paid transport service or something of that nature. So it's grown into air transport, ground transport. I recently built out a newer ground transport vehicle that can hold a lot more dogs than the airplane. The airplane side of it's nice, but it's also tremendously expensive. Whereas, I can make a bigger impact with the ground vehicle. I do have a property here that I have my zoning permission to build kennels on so that I could actually have a foster and adoption center. But I got to a point around 2020 after I got all excited. I got all my everything down. I'm like, wait a minute, I work full time. I'm like, I'm in over my head. Like, I can't realistically do this at this time. I'm at the point where I got probably at least another 10 years of working, right? So, short of a seven-figure miracle, we're not going to have drastic change anytime soon, because now you're looking at 3 to 5 million to really set this place up for the next 20 years to run it like that, and I'm just not there. So, but the basis of Flying Fur was to provide transportation for these other rescues that work so hard, that do all the hard work, to help save these animal lives. And it's transport, it's the potential for a kennel, um, and who knows from there. I mean, I have bigger dreams, but if I don't come up with a real solid plan, those dreams are going to kind of remain, dreams. So
Hmm.
you kind of hit that pain point as you grow, where I could easily do this and have it all set up, but suddenly I need a lot more money to do it because I
Right.
can't do it while I'm working a job full time like most everybody else.
Right. Exactly. And so, how do you find out about the different dogs that need rescued, and whether that's air transport or on the ground?
I've established partnerships with these rescue groups that I initially met, on the forums back when I first started doing this in 2014. So I work with a handful of rescue groups, and they keep me pretty busy. But I established partnerships with them, and I work with a lot of the same people now. We're going on 10 years this coming spring, and I've worked with the exact same groups, and it's expanded a little bit. But it's difficult more for the southern groups that are the senders, because they have to beg and plead for these rescues up here to take the animals. But again, they're the ones who establish the relationship, and then I just kind of come in and I help with the transport. But yeah, I tell you what, you will meet some of the best people from all walks of life in animal rescue. You wouldn't even believe the kind of people that will jump in an airplane, or, they just come from so many different backgrounds
Hmm.
that, it's just crazy. It's blown my mind how complete people from so many different walks of life will come together for this common cause, regardless of whatever background you may have. I think that's one of the most fantastic things.
Yeah. And you mentioned some of the rescues in the South. So I'm in Florida, and it seems like the Northeast maybe has it a little more put together than we do in the South. So we have such an issue in Florida, in Texas, gosh, even Alabama, Mississippi. And,
Yes.
we have such a need. We do have, fortunately, rescues that are trying to pull from our states, from these southern states. And that is such a need for us. And it is so difficult for us to move the dogs because, like you said, we're all working full time jobs. Most of us have two or three jobs because we do give back so much.
Right.
So, where do you see yourself flying to and from the most? Where are you picking up at the most? And then are you dropping off most of the dogs around like the Pennsylvania northeastern area, or tell us a little bit about your routes?
So the normal routes that I will do will be from here to Rocky Mount, North Carolina.
Okay.
And the group that I work with in Rocky Mount, they have their own little 501c3, and they pull from a local shelter. And they will work with rescue groups from, I will be Southern New Jersey, Northern New Jersey, New York City, Connecticut, even above there. There's pretty much a tri-state area or so. I would love to go further, but based on the performance of our aircraft, the fact that I have still a full-time job, it's a little more difficult. Again, you get to that seven-figure mark, and the trouble is, say, to upgrade the aircraft I'm in now to the next level, it's staggering. It's like you go
Hmm.
from a couple $100,000 aircraft to like a $2 million aircraft just to get to the next level. So it's a difficult step to make. But currently, that's about as far as I go because it might be a half a day off work if I can squeeze it in, or a full day. Most everybody's in the same position where they have some other type of employment that pays the bills, and they do this in their quote unquote spare time.
And what kind of aircraft do you have now, and how many dogs does it hold?
We currently have a 1970 V-35B. It's a Beechcraft Bonanza. It's a V-tail, and it has what's called the big baggage door, which the first time I saw the airplane, I knew nothing about them because I didn't train in these type of airplanes because at the time they were a very premium aircraft back in the day. I opened the door. I was like, oh my God, I'm like, the crates I could fit in here. It varies on quantity. If you're talking puppies and kittens, I mean, one of my more recent flights, I had 33 cats and kittens
Wow.
brought up from hurricane-stricken areas to clear space in the shelters ahead of, animals coming in. But I've had, 24, 25 puppies and kittens and full-size dogs. It's sort of, the crates I have fit very closely within the fuselage, and I kind of have to work out my weight and balance to keep the aircraft safe in flight. But yeah, again, next level aircraft that can do a lot more is significantly more expensive. So I'm working with what I have.
Hmm. Yeah, and I'm sure that there's all the additional costs. So not only just the aircraft, but maintenance, storage,
Yeah,
fuel, you name it. And there's way
hangar,
more to it.
hangar 700 a month. The airplane just came out of what's called annual inspections. So if you live in a state that has a regular car inspection once a year, like we do in PA, airplanes go through the same thing in GA. And that was, we had to have two cylinders replaced. So what would have normally been maybe $4,000 now is 11 grand. So you just never know when you're flying these older aircraft. The technology hasn't changed a whole lot. Within the FAA, it's very difficult to kind of make these changes because there's so many checks and balances for good reason, for safety. So we all are, even brand, new GA type. When I say GA, general aviation type airplanes, still use a lot of older technology because it's proven. But
Hmm.
with that still comes, yeah, maintenance and everything with an aircraft. I mean, people talk about boats, man. Let me tell you, boats got nothing on
Right.
maintaining airplanes.
Yeah, and you want to make sure your aircraft is ready because
Safety.
if you're driving your car and maybe your tires are starting to bald, you're like, okay, I'm risking it, but it's okay. But in an
Right.
aircraft, you're like, I really can't risk very much in this.
No, I'm very fortunate to have good mechanics that are very good at what they do, and they're very attentive. And that's tough in the GA world. That's another thing we're starting to suffer from is sort of the mechanic availability. There's a lot of stress on their shoulders versus the reward for them. So it's continually evolving in general aviation.
Yeah. So, and you said you recently have the ground transport, and is that a larger, like a bus?
It was a bus, the first vehicle I had that I bought in. So long story short, the airplane broke for it was initially a few days in 2018 or 2019, I guess 2019. And I, quote unquote, was helping the mechanic to do some of the work. And something broke in the process. And what should have been about 3 or 4 days turned into 30 days because of the effort. So I bought a bus off of eBay. I was literally standing in line one night at a restaurant getting takeout. I was just like, I could see the bids coming up closer to the buy it now. I'm like, oh, buy it now. So no idea. I did some research and I wanted something commercial because commercial type vehicles tend to be heavier duty, require less work over, as opposed to your passenger type, generic consumer vehicle. So we have a 1980 MCI-9 bus that was converted new into a motorhome, never was used as a bus. Used that since 2019. But because it was converted, I had to rip out the front of it to put crates in, and it was more RV than it was, animal rescue. And although it looked nice going down the road, it wasn't as efficient. So I moved 20 years into the future, and now we have a 2001 truck that I just bought that was built custom for people that used to race motorcycles in Louisiana. So I just bought that a few months ago, brought it back, put about, I don't know, 10 grand, 15 grand into it. And now that's just gone and done its first overnight. I did a trip last weekend to North Carolina and back to bring up 28 dogs.
Wow.
But it's game
Okay.
changer because it has a huge area dedicated I have these large, very heavy duty metal crates that bolt to the floor and bolt to the wall. They're very, very substantial. And now you have a very easy way to clean this thing, but you also have a small living quarter. So for me, I'm always worried about what I probably don't need to be worried about. But if anything ever happens over the road, I need to care for these animals in
Mm-hmm.
transit until I get them where they're going. So that means having a generator, having living quarters, having fresh water, having whatever it takes to take care of them until I can get them where they're going. So, a lot of rescues use Sprinter vans, and I'm just like, that's not quite enough for me. Like, I don't know. I feel very, I like to be completely independent on the road, so I don't have to rely on any outside resources short of fuel.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And you've kind of touched on some of the issues that you face as a 501(c)(3, but what would you say are like the biggest 2 or 3 issues that you currently face?
Personally, for me, I'm very handy, so I save a lot of money for the nonprofit by doing a lot of work on the vehicles myself, sans what I can't do on the airplane that has to be done by a certified mechanic. Really, it comes down to fundraising. I hate asking people for money. I absolutely despise it. And one of the things I've always has been my cornerstone is that I've always spent a lot of my own money, which I have no problem with doing this. And I've spent over 120,000 since I started doing this. And so really the next challenge for me now is learning how to actually ask people for money to say, hey, can you help us get, to the next level? How do I do that? Sort of things like that. I've always sucked at because I just hate asking people for money. It's some people have no problem doing it, and I've always been of the nature that if you like what I'm doing, you want to donate, great, and if you don't, that's fine too. I'm never going to twist your arm. I'm never going to try to convince you. I'm never going to do anything like that. But I mean, other than that, just growth of any business, right? Whether you're for profit or nonprofit, you have growing pains, and then your liability as well. So you have to be so careful trying to grow that you don't get yourself into trouble or try to take on too much.
I don't think a lot of people fully comprehend a lot of nonprofits. I'm involved with several nonprofits. I'm on the board of 2, and people just assume that donations flow in. And so if you have everyone pointing fingers and everyone assuming there's donations, there are no donations. And so I think for me, that's where I learned you have to ask. The worst that'll happen is they'll say no. But it's interesting as I've grown in the nonprofit space myself, just understanding people are like, I just, I thought the state gave you money. I thought the government gave you money. And they're rattling off, I thought these businesses gave you money. And it's a misconception that I, hope to break down. I hope people understand that a lot of us in the nonprofit world, especially with animal rescue, we don't have a lot of assistance coming from
No.
businesses, the government, anyone like that. Quite frankly, most of us have no additional assistance.
And I think the irony is when I first started doing this, I thought getting private support would be difficult and getting business side support would be easy. And it's been exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Private
Yeah.
that make up the difference, and businesses not so much at all. And I'm fortunate that we had the media exposure that we did back a couple of years ago that really catapulted me into the limelight and really turned a lot of people on to Flying Fur and has helped, carry us through. But you're right, you have to ask. It is difficult. You can show the results and everything, but it's still difficult. And I've always tried to be very transparent. Obviously, as a nonprofit, you have to be. But again, it's like, guys, I don't get paid to do this. I actually pay to do it. So I've tried to kind of separate myself a little bit. But there's a lot of nonprofits out there that do have staff and have salary, and you have to. You get to a certain point, it's just inevitable. You have to do that. But I think you also have to keep it realistic. Despite what the IRS guidelines are, things like that, if you're paying yourself X amount of dollars versus I don't, there's an area there that gets uncomfortable for me.
Yeah.
So to
Absolutely.
think of even taking a salary from the nonprofit myself eventually would be nice to do this full time, but it would also have to be realistic because that's not what people are donating for necessarily, right? They want to help animals, not pay for salaries and things like that. But that comes with the territory.
Yeah. And if people listening to this wanted to help you, you guys have a website that there's a donation link on there, correct?
There's under the donate section. I'll be updating that soon as we have Giving Tuesday come up. But it's even more than that, and I need to build into the website. There's so many people that want to volunteer and offer their expertise in different areas, and I don't have a really good way yet to collect that information. And I would like to do that because certain people, not everybody can donate, but they may have connections or they may have knowledge or business knowledge or something that still helps fuel the nonprofit. Not just doesn't have to just be money; it can be talent or
Hmm.
or just advice on how to do this. And that's something I'm really starting to pull back and open the doors on now because I definitely need it. And expanding my what I call my advisory board a little bit so that I can have more. It just gives you more credibility too when people see, hey, it's not just even though you can look up my financials, I feel like you just really need to have an established kind of crew, right? That everybody has the same mindset, going, the same goal for them.
Right. And what is your website? And also, what are your social media handles?
So the website is flyingfur.org, and it should be Flying Fur Animal Rescue on Facebook and Flying Fur on Instagram. They're the two main places that I post. I do some on X and Threads, but not as much as the other two. It's tough keeping up with it. I don't even have a TikTok account. I'm like, should I even bother doing it? Like, is it going to help? Like, I don't even know. Like, it's funny how time changes, and as you age, you have to keep up with the times and things that are changing, even though that necessarily makes sense to you. So it's one of the
Yeah.
struggles.
And it's a lot. I mean, like you said, Facebook and Instagram, but then you've got
Yes.
TikTok, YouTube, X, Threads, LinkedIn. There's probably 20 more platforms I'm missing, but
Yes.
it is difficult. You're like, okay, I posted on 2 platforms today, and you're like, oh, what about the others? And then you're like, well, I have to work, so let me come back to those. And then, they get pushed to the back burner because you have other things to do. So I totally get that.
It's a nuisance, but let's face it, in today's day and age, it's a reality. Like, this is a requirement. You have to do this stuff for people to find you, to even know that you exist.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Paul, thank you for the work that you're doing in the animal rescue space. And thank you for spending time on the podcast today. For anyone listening, make sure you go follow Flying for Animal Rescue on Facebook and on Instagram.
Well, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Canine Culture Podcast. Please make sure you subscribe to the Canine Culture Podcast on your favorite podcast platform, and make sure you're following us on social media. If you have any recommendations, any topics that you'd like to hear, if you know of any guests that would be good for the show, or if you yourself want to be a guest, please reach out to us. Send us an email at canineculturepodcast@gmail.com, or send us a direct message on social media. Thank you for listening, and please share this with any of your dog-loving friends.